Hey everyone, Riley here, and welcome back to another segment of Overkill Reviews this week. If you haven't already, hit subscribe, give us a like. We super appreciate all of the support all the time. This week we're going to be looking at an album from a Portland, Oregon-based stoner rock metal band. If you have guessed Red Fang, then you would be correct. This is their album Arrows, out today, June 4th, 2021, via Relapse Records. So let's get to know Red Fang, shall we? So Red Fang is a stonery, rockety, metally band based out of Portland, Oregon. They consist of Aaron Beam on bass and vocals. They've got Brian Gills on vocals and guitar, John Sherman on drums, and David Sullivan also on guitar. They released their self-titled debut album via Sargent House Records in 2009, and they've rapidly been ramping up their fan base ever since. So let's find out if this new album is just as grisly and rock and roll as the last. So when you look at stoner rock, stoner metal, this subgenre can be super interesting, but it can also be not so interesting. And I find that a lot of bands have a really hard time getting into that groove of what really makes them sound unique and what really makes this subgenre unique to others. And when I look at other bands in the subgenre, you get bands like The Sword, Orange Goblin, Sleep, even some Electric Wizard. If you want to look at Sleep, you can take a classic tune like Dragonaut, and one, you instantly know who the band is, and two, right off the bat, they give you that really, really groovy intro that's super weighted, and right then and there, you know exactly what this band's motive is. You're usually presented with more of an unorthodox song structure. You get a little bit of a slower tempo, you get a lot of different dimension, various hooks, and I'm going to take these aspects of other bands, like Sleep for example, and maybe lay this on the line of what I would find the varying points are between something like stoner rock and something like stoner metal, so to speak. So when we're looking at Red Fang's Arrows, for example, this new release, I would say that it leans more towards that rock side of the line, the stoner rock. And why do I think this? So right off the bat, you could tell that the song structure is a little bit more on the simple side. The song lengths are shorter. They bring back a lot of melodies and hooks so you can really get familiar with them, and it's a little bit more digestible than bands like Sleep, Electric Wizard, so on and so forth, for example. With that being said, I think they almost are succeeding in the way that they bring out this more simplistic rock aspect because they have these prettier pieces that come out with it. Because they are more focused on a melody, you can really hook in there and harness these beautiful pieces. They get stuck in your head and you're like, wow, that's beautiful. For example, on pre-release singles like Why and the self-titled Arrows, the verse is very melodic and digestible, and so is the chorus, and they actually complement each other quite nicely, and it's super catchy. And when the lyrical content's pretty grim, they've got a lot in there about humanity and kind of the darkness of the realistic world. It's super nice to have these melodic bits that break up that very rough force that they're feeding you. Stoner rock and Red Fang, for example, like to use a lot of distortion and a lot of classic fuzz. And these melodies and these easy pieces to digest are super, super nice in this puddle of unclear mud, because you can pick out these pieces and go, yep, that's great. But it's also just this well-rounded kind of ominous, eerie vibe. So on Arrows, I think that Red Fang realistically just wrote us a bunch of pop songs, jacked up the distortion and injected them full of gasoline. And you know what? I kind of like it because it's really nice to hear a simpler thing every now and again in a world where every band seems to think that being the heaviest means sweeping the fastest, or blast beating the fastest, or writing the most complex 8-piece ballad. This is good. I also really liked the variety and tempo on this album. There's 2 songs in particular, My Desaster and Rabbits in Hives, that have a faster tempo. My Desaster is a lot more hardcore, and when I was listening to it, I was actually thinking to myself, this sounds a lot like Moon by the band Turnstile, and I was like humming Moon over top of this, and I was like, whoa, this would sound super cool layered. So if you like hardcore, or like metal bands that kind of have a hardcore origin every once in a while, those would probably be some songs for you. Rabbits and Hives I also thought was great, and I'm gonna be honest, I tried looking for if there was anything that the band said about like what Rabbits and Hives means, because I don't know what the fuck that means. But the song sounds exactly like if a rabbit was fucking around with a beehive and had to hightail it 100 miles an hour out of there. That's what it sounds like, and I love when a song sounds just like the title. It just fits so perfectly. That's great. I also think it's fairly easy for a lot of stoner metal and stoner rock to fall pretty flat because it relies so heavily on distortion and that classic fuzz sound and tone. But there's one song on this album, it was called Fonzie Scheme, which I actually read is named after Arthur Fonzarelli from Happy Days. Love that. But they added a lot of harmonies in there on the vocals, and that was a super nice added dimension and layer because you could really differentiate like the 2 main levels that they were giving you, and I thought that was a very nice breakup. One of the tracks on this album is called Too High, and it starts off with this distorted, nonsensical static overload that just made my brain like start to implode. And if it would have went on any longer, I don't know what I would have done with myself. But I literally wrote down in my notes, sounds like a haunted ghost ship that I don't want to be on. Like I said, very ominous atmosphere for this album. And when they pull around to the conclusion, they end it with one of the singles called Funeral Coach. Opening riff was actually written 11 years ago, so I'm really glad that they're finally getting to put it to use now, and it's a great track. But the one thing that I found was kind of cool and kind of odd was the song comes to a pretty abrupt end, and usually when you're listening to an album, the outro, the last song on the album, kind of gives you a conclusion. It fades out, or it's more of a longer ballad, whatever. You feel like this is the ending of this album, and this is it, it's over. But this very abrupt end almost gave me the feeling like this is me now anticipating more Red Fang, because I wasn't ready for it to be over. So here I am, hoping for more Red Fang. The bad, eh? So there isn't too much bad that I have to say about this album. Red Fang, they pull out the grooves, they pull out the catchy choruses and the catchy melodies, they pull out the sick riffs, they pull out that classic fuzz distortion. There really isn't anything wrong, but it's just missing that tiny little sprinkle of magic that like throws it over the edge for me. You know, like that cool breath of air on your skin, or that sparkle, and then you feel it. It's that level of intimacy. I can taste it on my tongue, I can almost grab it, but I can't get to it. It's just not there. It's flat. The dimension is just flat. I want to be able to climb over the dimensions and the layers in an album and the emotions in the album, like mountain passages, and feel through them and make my way through this journey that I'm listening to. And I just kind of felt like I was coasting along the top this whole time. There was just a level of disconnect for me. I just want more texture. I want to be able to feel it. I want to be able to feel it like the grooves on an old tree. I want to feel it in my heart. I want to feel it in my soul. They feed you so much aggression, this whole album, but I'm not actually feeling the aggression. I'm just hearing it. I think this album really just challenged how much classic fuzz I can handle in one sitting. And because the subgenre relies so heavily on things like distortion and classic fuzz, maybe stoner rock just isn't for me. The album was super consistent, but maybe that tone is just not my cup of tea. It's just not my thing. Arrows felt like a weighted box, and I was like, damn, there's something really fucking sick in here. And then I tried to reach my hand in, but I couldn't feel anything in the box. So all in all, Red Fang has made this sound for themselves. They've made this great career for themselves. It's consistent, and they no doubt harness all of that aggression, and they're a little bit raunchies, and it's definitely digestible for all of the rockers out there. But all in all, Red Fang sound is Red Fang sound, and Arrow's sound is Red Fang sound. And if you don't like Red Fang, you probably just won't like Arrow's. There's no surprises on this album. There's no weird twists or turns. They're not trying to go for anything different that they haven't already done already. They're just keeping it classic, the way that they like it, just unvarnished Red Fang that the stoner rockers have come to know and love, and that we've come to know and love. So all in all, I think I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5 skulls here today on Overkill Reviews. So with that being said, I'm going to jump into my shoutouts. So the first one I have here for you today, I really enjoyed. So the band is called Hirsi, and this is their third album titled 3. They are a Finnish, Canadian, folkity, metally, blackety, pagany project, and this came out on May 14th. It was self-released. It was mixed and mastered by Alex Snape at Nomadic Arts, and you should definitely give it a listen. Second up, I have the German death blackened thrash old school band. They're titled Desaster. This is their album Churches Without Saints. It is out today, June 4th, 2021 via Metal Blade Records. If you like old school death metal, this is the album for you. And the third one I have, this is a band called Oriflamme. The album is called Egide Ardente. It was out May 13th, 2021 via Sepulchral Productions. They are a French-Canadian black metal band based out of Montreal. They are a 3-piece, and this is their debut atmospheric, classic, aggressive black metal album. Really worth the listen. Check that out. Let me know in the comments section down below how you guys felt about Red Fang's new album, Arrows, and I hope you have a safe and wonderful weekend. Thanks for coming to hang out with me. Bye-bye.